I was sitting at the kitchen table, going through my recipe box, when my son walked in. He didn't knock. He never knocks anymore. He just walked straight through the back door, the way he's done since he was 7 years old, except now he's 34, and he had that look on his face, the one where he's already decided something and just needs to inform me of it. "Mom, we need to talk about Christmas." I set down the index card I was holding. My mother's pecan pie recipe, written in her handwriting, the ink faded to a pale brown. I'd been planning to make 3 of them this year. "All right," I said. "Sit down. Do you want coffee? I can't stay long." He pulled out a chair but didn't sit. "Genevieve and I have been talking, and we've decided to do Christmas differently this year. We're hosting at our place." I felt something shift in my chest, but I kept my face steady. "That sounds nice. What can I bring?" He looked at the floor. "That's the thing, Mom. We're doing it catered. Genevieve found this company that does the whole thing. They set up, serve, clean up. It's very elegant, very—" He paused, searching for a word. "Curated." "Curated," I repeated. "And the thing is, we're inviting some people from her firm. Partners. Important people. And we want everything to be consistent, professional." I looked at him for a long moment. I thought about the Christmas he was 9, when the power went out on December 23rd, and we made everything on a camping stove on the back porch, laughing so hard we could barely breathe. I thought about how he used to ask me every single year if we could have the sweet potato casserole with the marshmallows on top, the kind his grandmother made, the kind food magazines would never in a million years call elegant. "So, you don't want me to bring anything," I said. "We just think it'll be easier, cleaner, if we keep it to one vision. Genevieve has a real eye for these things. And where do the kids fit into this vision?" He finally sat down. "That's actually the other thing. The partners bring their kids, so it'll be a whole separate room for the children with a babysitter. We were thinking you could maybe help with that. Keep an eye on things in the kids' room." I was 63 years old. I had taught high school English for 31 years. I had raised this man, packed his lunches, sat with him through fevers and heartbreak, and the night he called me from a gas station parking lot in Ohio because he'd gotten his first speeding ticket and didn't know what to do. And now I was being offered a position as babysitter in the children's corner, while strangers in catering uniforms served food I had made to people I'd never met. "I see," I said. He left 20 minutes later. He hugged me at the door, and I hugged him back because he is my son, and I always will. And then I stood at the window and watched his car pull out of the driveway. The pecan pie recipe was still on the table. I picked it up and looked at it for a long time. Then I put it back in the box. My neighbor Paulette came over the next morning. She does that, shows up around 9 with her travel mug and plants herself at my kitchen table like she belongs there, which honestly, after 16 years of living next door, she kinda does. I told her what happened. All of it. She listened without interrupting, which is not her natural state, so I knew she understood this was serious. When I finished, she set down her mug. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet." "Yes, you do." She was right. Something had been forming in the back of my mind since the night before. Something small and stubborn. I didn't want to sit in a room and supervise children at my son's catered Christmas while his wife's colleagues admired the floral arrangements. I didn't want to spend December 25th feeling like a piece of furniture someone had decided didn't match anymore. I wanted to cook. I wanted to make the pecan pie. I wanted to make the sweet potato casserole with the marshmallows. I wanted to make the green bean dish my grandmother brought from Virginia, and the cranberry sauce I do from scratch with orange zest, and the dinner rolls I've been making since 1987 that take 2 days but fill the whole house with a smell I have no adequate words for. If my son's Christmas was going to be curated, I decided, then I would have my own. I called the church first. Our congregation runs a small outreach program. Nothing fancy, just a handful of us who check in on elderly members who live alone. I knew there were people on that list who had nowhere to go on Christmas. I called Pastor Donna and asked if I could get some names. She gave me 4. 4 people in our congregation who were going to spend Christmas Day alone. Then I called the community center 2 miles from my house. They coordinate holiday meals for international students from the nearby college, kids whose families are overseas, who can't afford to fly home, who spend American holidays eating dining hall food, if the dining hall is even open. The woman I spoke to, her name was Cheryl, got quiet when I asked if she had students who needed somewhere to go on Christmas. "How many can you take?" she asked. I looked around my kitchen. I have a long table in the dining room. I have a folding table in the basement. I have more chairs than any one person needs. "Tell them to bring an appetite," I said. I called my friend Wanda next. We met at a teacher's workshop in 1998 and have been friends ever since. She retired 2 years before I did and has been trying to get me involved in her volunteer work at a transitional housing facility. Women getting back on their feet, some with young children. "Do any of them have somewhere to go for Christmas?" I asked. "Most of them don't," Wanda said. "Then bring whoever wants to come." By the end of the week, I had 22 people coming to my house for Christmas dinner, 4 church members who lived alone, 6 international students, 8 women from Wanda's facility, 3 of them with children, Paulette and her husband, who I hadn't even asked formally, but who'd been listening through my kitchen window and announced they were bringing the wine. I had 31 days to prepare. I planned the menu the way I plan everything, on paper, at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and all the time in the world. 2 turkeys, because one was never going to be enough. The pecan pies. The sweet potato casserole. Mashed potatoes, real ones, with enough butter to alarm a cardiologist. Green beans, the way my grandmother made them. Slow cooked with ham hocks. Cranberry sauce. Dinner rolls. A green salad. A fruit salad for the kids. A vegetarian option, because I didn't know everyone's needs yet, and I wanted everyone to find something on that table that felt like it was made for them. I started cooking things that could be frozen 3 weeks out. Stock for the gravy. Cranberry sauce. I made the pie crusts in batches and froze them flat, the way my mother taught me. I went through my pantry and my budget with equal care. I'm on a fixed income now, Social Security and a modest pension from the school district, and I wasn't going to pretend otherwise. I did the math. I stretched where I could. I used dried beans instead of canned where the flavor wasn't compromised. I watched for sales. My grocery store had turkeys on deep discount the week before Christmas, and I bought 2 and hauled them home in a cart and felt absurdly pleased with myself. Paulette came over on the 23rd to help me set up. Her husband Roger brought the extra folding chairs from his truck, and we arranged the tables in the dining room and the living room, pushed the furniture back, draped everything in white tablecloths I'd found at a thrift store for $2 each. We put out the good dishes. Not the formal china I never use, but my everyday dishes that I love, the blue and white ones I've had for 20 years. We lit candles. We put a small poinsettia in the center of each table, $5 each from the grocery store. By the time we were done, it was past 9. Paulette stood in my dining room doorway with her hands on her hips and looked at what we'd made. "This is beautiful," she said. It was. Not elegant, not curated, not professional. Beautiful. They started arriving at noon on Christmas Day. The church members came first. 3 women and 1 man, all over 70, all dressed up the way people used to dress up for things. One of the women, whose name was Harriet, brought a small plate of cookies wrapped in foil because, she told me, she was raised to never arrive at anyone's home empty-handed. I told her she was the most well-raised person I knew. The students arrived in a group. 6 of them, a little uncertain at the door, and I said, come in, we're so glad you're here." And one of them, a young man named Deo, visiting from Nigeria, studying civil engineering, shook my hand formally and said, "Thank you for having us, ma'am." And I thought I might cry right there in the foyer, so I sent everyone to find seats instead. Wanda brought the women from the facility in 2 carloads. The children, there were 4 of them, ages 3 to 8, came in like small, bright missiles and immediately found the corner, where I'd set up some coloring books and crayons, and the 8-year-old, whose name was Zoe, told me very seriously that she liked my house because it smelled like cookies. I told her she was right, it did, and that after dinner she could have as many as she wanted. By 12:30 my house was full of people talking over each other, children on the floor with crayons, Paulette refilling water glasses, Wanda slicing the bread I hadn't gotten to yet, Roger carrying the second turkey to the table on the big wooden board I've had since my wedding. I stood at the edge of the dining room and looked at all of it. I thought about the year I was 31, newly divorced, my son 4 years old, and my parents drove 6 hours to spend Christmas with us because they knew I was struggling. My mother brought a ham, and my father brought a case of sparkling cider. And nobody mentioned the divorce, and we played board games until 2 in the morning. That was the Christmas I understood what the holiday was actually for. Not to impress anyone, just to make sure nobody felt alone. That's what I was doing. 32 years later, a little older, a little more deliberate about it, making sure nobody felt alone. I went back into the kitchen to check on the gravy. We ate for 3 hours. I know that sounds excessive, but when you have 22 people and you're not rushing anywhere and there is genuinely that much food, 3 hours is actually efficient. The first turkey disappeared faster than I expected. The sweet potato casserole was gone before I even made it back to the table after serving it. Dale had 2 helpings of the green beans and then apologized for having 2 helpings, and I told him to please have a third. The stories started coming out the way they do when people relax. One of the church women, a widow named Marguerite, told us about the Christmas she and her late husband spent in Munich decades ago, how they'd wandered into a stranger's home by accident and been welcomed in and fed and hadn't understood a word all evening and had loved every minute of it. Paulette told the story, which I have heard many times, about the Christmas Roger proposed on one knee in a parking lot outside a Denny's because that was where they'd had their first date, and everyone laughed, and Roger looked embarrassed but pleased. The children ate quickly and went back to their crayons. Zoe made a drawing of what she called the turkey table and presented it to me with great ceremony, and I told her I was going to hang it on my refrigerator, which I did later that evening, right in the center. Around 4 o'clock, when the plates were mostly cleared and people were lingering over coffee and pie, my phone rang. I looked at the screen. My son. I stepped out onto the back porch to answer it, closing the door behind me. The December air was cold and sharp, and through the kitchen window I could see the warm light inside, people moving around. Wanda refilling the coffee, a child tugging on one of the churchwoman's sleeves. "Hi, sweetheart," I said. "Mom." His voice was strange. Tight. "Hi. How's your day?" "Very full. We're still at the table, actually. How's the party?" He was quiet for a moment. It didn't really. The caterers had some kind of issue. There was a mix-up with the order. They delivered the wrong menu. Half of it was for another event. And then he stopped. And then Genevieve and her senior partner had a disagreement about a case at dinner, in front of everyone. It got bad. Some of the partners left early. I sat down on the porch step. The cold seeped through my jeans. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. I was not glad it went wrong. He is my son. His pain is always mine. The food was terrible, Mom. His voice cracked a little on the last word. It was cold, and there wasn't enough of it, and it tasted like, I don't know, like nothing, like catering. I didn't say anything. "I missed your cooking," he said very quietly. Through the window I heard someone laughing, a warm, real sound. "I know," I said. "Mom, I'm sorry for what I said about keeping things professional. You're not a catering problem. You're my mother." I looked up at the sky. The first stars were starting to appear, small and cold and steady. "I love you," I said. "That doesn't change. Can I come over? Is it too late? I just want to see you." And maybe, a pause and a small hopeful note in his voice that took me straight back to 1998, to a 9-year-old standing in a dark kitchen asking if there were leftovers. "Come over," I said. "There's plenty of everything. Bring Genevieve if she's up for it." He drove over with his wife an hour later. Genevieve, whom I have always been polite with and never quite easy with, walked into my house and stopped in the doorway and looked at the tables and the people and the candles burning low and the drawing of the turkey table stuck to my refrigerator, and something moved across her face that I hadn't seen there before. "This is incredible," she said, quietly, like she meant it. I gave them both plates. I sat them down at the end of the table near Marguerite, who promptly started telling the Munich story again to a new audience, and my son leaned back in his chair with a plate of food on the table in front of him and looked around the room with an expression I recognized. It was the expression he used to get as a little boy when he'd been outside in the cold too long and finally came inside and felt the warmth hit him. He was home. Everybody helped clean up, which I did not expect and which moved me more than almost anything else from that day. Deo washed dishes. The 8-year-old Zoe dried them very slowly and very earnestly and dropped one which didn't break, and apologized for 4 minutes straight. Marguerite packed up the leftover rolls in foil before I could say anything and distributed them to whoever was leaving, the way she said her mother used to do. Roger hauled the folding tables back to the garage. Paulette swept the kitchen floor. By 8 o'clock, the house was quiet. My son and Genevieve were the last to leave. He hugged me in the doorway for a long time and didn't say anything, and I didn't either, because there wasn't anything that needed saying anymore. I went back inside and sat down at the kitchen table. The house smelled like turkey and candles and coffee, and a little bit like crayon from where Zoe had apparently drawn on one of the placemats, which I didn't mind. The good dishes were stacked and clean. The flowers had shed a few petals onto the white tablecloth. I thought about Genevieve's face in the doorway. I thought about Deo's formal handshake and Marguerite's cookies in the drawing on my refrigerator. I thought about my son, sitting at my table with a plate of my food, finally looking warm. My cooking is not Michelin-starred. It is not elegant or curated or professionally plated. I learned most of it from my mother, who learned it from hers, who made it through depression and a world war with a kitchen and a determination to feed whoever walked through the door. That's what I have. That's what I gave. And when I look at what this Christmas became, 22 strangers around a table, a child making a drawing of a turkey, a son coming home, I think that's actually more than enough. More than enough. I went to bed that night with my feet aching and my heart full, and I fell asleep thinking about Easter and whether 22 people might like to come back. I've had a lot of time to think about that Christmas. Not in a bitter way. I moved past bitter somewhere around the time I was counting folding chairs in my basement. More in a quiet, steady way. The kind of thinking you do when something is settled into place and you're trying to understand exactly how it got there. What my son did hurt. I won't soften that. When he sat across from me at my kitchen table and told me my home wasn't the right setting, that my cooking didn't fit the vision, I felt something close and go cold inside me. Not anger. Something older and quieter than anger. The feeling of being told that the thing you've given most freely your whole life, your hands, your kitchen, your table, isn't quite enough. But here's what I've come to believe, and I believe it not because someone told me, but because I lived it that December. The way you respond to being diminished says everything about who you actually are. My son made a choice driven by fear. Fear of how he'd look. Fear of not measuring up. Fear of the people at that table judging him. Fear makes people small. It made him small. Temporarily. In a way I don't think he's proud of now. And the choice I made, to take that hurt and turn it into a table set for 22, wasn't noble or calculated. It was just the only thing that felt true to me. I cook because I love. I open my door because I was raised to believe there is always room. When someone tells you that what you are isn't enough, you can collapse inward or you can expand outward. I expanded. What happened to my son's Christmas was not punishment. I want to be clear about that. It was consequence. There is a difference. When you build something, a dinner, a relationship, a reputation, on the wrong foundation, on image instead of warmth, on performance instead of presence, it tends to crack under pressure. The caterers failed. Genevieve and her colleague clashed. The evening fell apart at the seams because it was held together by appearances, and appearances don't hold. They never do, not for long. Meanwhile, in my living room, Marguerite was telling the story about Munich. Dea was washing dishes at my sink. Zoe was drawing turkeys on my placemats. None of it was elegant. All of it was real. Resilience isn't a personality trait you're born with. I think it's a decision you make, over and over, in small moments that don't feel significant until you look back. Every time I kept cooking for people who forgot to say thank you. Every time I set an extra place just in case. Every time I chose to treat my own table as worthy, even when someone else suggested otherwise. Those were practice runs. For that Christmas, for that moment on the porch when my son's voice cracked and I had to decide what kind of mother I was going to be, I chose to say, "Come home." I'll always choose that. What I want anyone watching this to take away isn't a lesson about karma or about proving people wrong. It's simpler than that. It's this: the life you build with your hands, quietly, over decades. The recipes you keep, the neighbors you feed, the door you leave unlocked for people who need somewhere warm to land. That life is not invisible. It shows up. It fills a room. And on the nights when the carefully constructed, catered, curated version of things falls apart, the real thing is still standing, still warm, still enough. More than enough. It always was.